It's the beginning of the fall season here in the Pacific Northwest, and I'm so excited for the cozy days ahead. We usually start to cool off here in October, and it becomes the perfect weather for baking. What better way to welcome fall than with homemade cinnamon rolls? And if you're looking for pumpkin recipes, this checks that box as well. These cinnamon sourdough pumpkin rolls will make a wonderful breakfast or dessert. And since these include pumpkin puree and pumpkin pie spice, they're also perfect for a Halloween treat or on the Thanksgiving dessert table. So I started with a traditional cinnamon roll recipe and turned it into sourdough cinnamon rolls. And then I added pumpkin puree to the dough, and then additional pumpkin puree and pumpkin pie spice to the filling. When you pull these cinnamon pumpkin sourdough rolls out of the oven, you'll notice their orange tint. They're so beautiful. When I make a recipe, I try to make it as healthy as possible while still tasting delicious. What you'll like about this recipe is, of course, that it uses sourdough, which, because it's fermented, it helps make the grains more digestible. It's more gentle on your guts. The pumpkin in this sourdough pumpkin roll recipe not only tastes delicious, but pumpkin is good for you. It has a lot of beta carotene and vitamin C. I think you'll also like that you don't have to have pumpkin pie spice on hand in order to make this recipe. I've given you the measurements for the common baking spices that are typically in pumpkin pie spice. I like to avoid refined sugars as much as possible in baking. And so in this recipe, you'll find some honey in the dough, sucanat or organic brown sugar in the filling, and maple syrup in the cream cheese frosting. If you want to, you can substitute 2 teaspoons of pumpkin pie spice in place of the ginger, nutmeg, cloves, and allspice in the filling. Instead of buying canned pumpkin puree, you can always make your own pumpkin puree or even use butternut squash puree. This recipe calls for fed sourdough starter, which means that you want to feed it 4 to 12 hours before you begin making the recipe. It just depends on how active your sourdough starter is to begin with, as well as the temperature in your kitchen. Also make sure that your cream cheese is softened before you make your cream cheese frosting, so that you can get the creamiest frosting possible. And if you don't have a stand mixer, this is possible to make using your hands to knead the dough. Now I'm going to take you along with me while I make these cinnamon sourdough pumpkin rolls. I hope you enjoy. The night before you want to bake your cinnamon rolls, you're going to make the dough. So right here I'm putting in a 1/2 cup of sourdough starter. And this has been fed. You want to feed your starter 4 to 10 hours before you make this recipe. Then 1/2 cup of water and 1/2 cup of pumpkin puree. And 1/4 cup of melted butter and 2 tablespoons of honey. This honey can be kind of hard to scoop because it's really thick. It's usually the bulk honey, local honey tends to be thick like that. And 3 cups of unbleached all-purpose flour. Now you want to do the flour last because you want to be able to gauge how much you need. You might need a little bit less than the 3 cups because you don't want it to turn out too dry. And that can kind of depend on the hydration of your sourdough starter. Yours might be thicker than mine. Also, somehow I cut out where I added 3/4 teaspoon of salt, but you want to do that right before you add the flour. I'm just scraping the sides down so it can mix in all of the dry ingredients to the wet ingredients. And your dough is going to come out to be a beautiful orange color. There you go, you can see that. And you want it to be in a ball like that. You don't want it to be really sticky or you won't be able to handle it and roll it out in the morning to make your cinnamon rolls. So now I'm going to grease the bowl And you can put it in a different bowl if you want to. You will need something that you can make your frosting in the next day. Or you can just let it rise in the stand mixer bowl and cover it with something airtight and then a towel. And here I am in the morning. My dough has risen and fermented overnight. Now I'm flouring a work surface so I can roll it out. You're going to roll it out into a rectangle, and you want it to be 1/4 to 1/2 inch thick. Now, if you're looking for an even healthier option for this recipe, you could use whole wheat flour. Okay, now I'm making the filling for the pumpkin rolls. So you start with 1/4 cup of butter, which I started melting on medium heat. Then I'm adding 1/4 cup of pumpkin puree and 1/2 cup of sucanat, or you can use an organic brown sugar. I'm just trying to do the more natural option for my sugar. And you want to stir that up while the butter continues to melt. Make sure everything is cooking together. And now I'm going to add the spices. You need 1/2 teaspoon each of ginger, nutmeg, cloves, and allspice. And if you have pumpkin pie spice, then you can use that instead. You'll use 2 teaspoons of pumpkin pie spice. But no matter if you're using pumpkin pie spice or the 4 separate spices, you will still add a tablespoon of cinnamon at the end. Right here, I'm adding the cinnamon. And just mix everything until it's incorporated, and then take it off the heat. And now I'm going to add that to the rolled out dough. And you want to spread it out evenly and leave about 1/2 inch border around the edges so that it doesn't make it difficult to roll up. Okay, you're going to roll it up lengthwise. And one issue I started to have was the filling was trying to push out. So I didn't go all the way to the end with my rolling. I brought the end over towards me to prevent the filling from coming out. And then you want to pinch the seam together so that it doesn't unroll. I use dental floss, and I mark where I'm going to be cutting my 12 rolls so that they're all evenly spaced out. And then I start actually cutting the rolls. I'm going to place them into a 10-inch cast iron skillet. A 12-inch would probably be a little bit better so that you don't have to squeeze them together as much. Or you can use a 9x13 baking pan. If you prefer a sweeter roll, you could add more sugar to the filling. And it would help thicken it up a little bit too, so it's not quite as runny. If you're having problems with the filling being too runny, next time you could try just softening the butter but not melting it and whipping everything together. I've done it both ways. Here I'm trying to squeeze enough room for the last two rolls. There. Okay, now I am making the cream cheese frosting. So I did 8 ounces of cream cheese softened, 2 tablespoons of softened butter. I'm doing 1/4 cup of pure maple syrup, a teaspoon of milk, and a teaspoon of vanilla. Now, something that will help it to become really creamy is if you mix the cream cheese and the butter together first and then add the rest of the ingredients. All right, now you're going to add your cream cheese frosting when your pumpkin rolls are still warm. And just spread it all over. This maple cream cheese frosting adds a lot to the rolls, so don't skip out on it. And voila, it's ready to serve. I hope you enjoy these cinnamon sourdough pumpkin rolls. Please leave a comment for me and let me know how it went. I would love it if you subscribe to my channel. I make new content every week on farm fresh recipes and simple living ideas to help you on your journey to a healthy and happy home. I will have the printable recipe for these rolls linked in the description box. I'll see you later.